Hi everyone, I'm Rachael Johns and I'm super excited to be here today with the fabulous Maisey Yates. I'm sure she needs no introduction, but I'm going to read a little bit of her bio and then add a few words of my own. I am going to read it so that I get it right. So thanks Maisey, hello, and
Excited.
I love your top, you're wearing my favourite colour.
Thank you. It's officially 1,000 degrees. I don't think I'm exaggerating, so I'm like...
Oh, well, we're freezing. Well, actually, I'm not too freezing here because I've just been for a walk, but it's cold here. Love your office too. It's looking so fabulous with all those many books that we're just about to talk about. Okay, I'll get to the official business. New York Times and USA Today bestselling author Maisey Yates lives in rural Oregon with her 3 children and her husband, whose chiseled jaw and arresting features continue to make her swoon. And having met him, I understand why. And he's a lovely person as well. So, you know, the whole package. Maisey feels the epic trek she takes several times a day from her office to the coffee maker is a true example of her pioneer spirit. And I agree. In 2009, at the age of 23, Maisey sold her first book. Since then, it's been a whirlwind of sexy alpha males and happily ever afters, and she wouldn't have it any other way. Either would we. Maisey divides her writing time between dark, passionate category romances set just about everywhere on earth and light, sexy contemporary romances set practically in her backyard. And she believes she clearly has the best job in the world. Now, I'm going to add a little bit to this because I think also we've forgotten that you've even added extra type of books now since this bio.
Right. Yeah. My bio.
Yes, exactly. Oh, you know, who has time to update their bio when they're writing as many books as you?
It's a low priority. I was going to say, I think for everybody, but
yeah, I think so too. I only do it when the publisher says, oh, here's your bio, and I realize it says I live like in the country and I don't anymore or something like that. Anyway, I'm going to add that Maisey is a lover of Diet Coke like me. I don't have
one with
never mind. I'm sure you've had some already.
Yeah, let's not talk about how many because it's hot.
And I love the mug. And she's also a fabulous crafter. Correct me if I'm wrong, but in the last year or so, you've taken up knitting. I don't know the timing exactly.
It is. It's been about a year. So I started in March of last year. So
wow. And I'm going off tangent already. I love it too, and I don't do as much as you, but what made you decide to do that?
It was actually Megan Crane / Caitlin Cruz, who some of you may know who she is. Also, she writes romantic suspense and some other things as Megan Crane, and then Harlequin presents.
I think it's still called Sexy.
Yeah, it's so anyway, at least it was, and so everyone will know what I mean. As Caitlin Cruz, and then Cowboys as Caitlin Cruz as well. She is a good friend of mine. She's a good friend of ours, and she actually lives
fabulous.
And she literally forced a yarn ball and needles into my hand because I was determinedly not knitting because other people were doing it, and I'm kind of a hipster, so I was like, no, I don't want to knit anyway, and I was felting. I'm so sick of watching you angrily felt while you like ask us questions about knitting. You need to just do it, and I was like, no, I can't do it. And she like shoved knitting needles and yarn in my hand and like did it for me, like did the first piece for me, which is
she taught you.
Because yeah, she taught me how to knit. So and I was just saying this to another writer earlier today, Nicole Helm, as she was doing one of her hobbies. I was gonna say,
does she knit yet?
No, she does not knit.
No?
Talk about hipsters who are not going to do what everyone else is doing.
I thought so.
As a hobby, research genealogy, and she said something about I need to figure out how to get people to pay me for this, and I said I think well-balanced people call this a hobby.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like a hobby, like not another outlet for my obsessive tendencies. And I was like, yes, that's what I pretend knitting is, a hobby.
Yeah, I love that.
To be obsessed with. So.
But I think writers in general, like a lot of us, that's the thing, we are pretty obsessive personalities, and so if we do anything, we throw our all into it, and then yeah, it's hard to keep something as a hobby. You know, it's good.
It always turns into like, and it's obsessive. Like the amount of yarn that I have is ridiculous.
No, well, I'm enjoying watching all that kind of stuff, and as I said, I don't knit as much, but I love it too. And so we have the time. I have no idea, but I enjoy watching it. Who knows? We don't know about time. We're not going to talk about time because it's one of those things that, you know,
away from you.
Who knows? And I thought I'd also explain to those watching, when I said that, oh, yeah, because I've enjoyed like watching your crafting, but also your writing journey, because I feel like I have been on it in a way with you a lot of that time, because we met many moons ago. I'm not even sure how many, online.
Yes.
What were the boards called then?
It was Subcare was like the sub thing of the
And they're still there, aren't they?
No, it's all to a Facebook group. They are gone.
Oh, it's all Facebook groups. Yeah, I haven't been there very much. But we met basically when we were both aspiring to write for Harlequin Mills and Boon. Yeah. And met other people that you've mentioned at the time as well. But then we've also written one collaboration kind of together.
That was just, New Orleans was kind of just up in the memories because we were in New Orleans in May.
Yes.
Ago now, and that's where the Deacons of Bourbon Street series came from, with the aforementioned Megan Crane and
Jackie Ashenden. Yeah.
Yes, and we were wandering about Bourbon Street and eating lots of beignets, and we are not doing that right now, but
no.
That's a good memory. Yeah, we have definitely been kind of on this journey together.
And I've written about 25 books, and you've written about 2,500. Is that right?
If we're using the same metric that I'm using to count the temperature, yes.
Exactly. So, you know, who cares? Anyway, so it's been fun watching you, and I just think you're amazing. And so I've got lots of questions, and other people have lots of questions to ask too. And so I was also going to say that, yeah, not anyone who reads your books will know this, and I'm sure most people listening will know that you are, as I've already said, crazy prolific. I think you're probably one of the fastest and most productive writers on the planet. I don't think that, I mean, there are a few of you out there, but you've been doing this for quite a while now and consistently producing, you know, books that everybody loves fast. And, you know, because I know when we talked years ago, you know, a lot of people sometimes said, oh, well, it won't last. She won't be able to keep up this output. Well, that you showed them, didn't you?
I mean, honestly, if I wrote less books, I would have to wash dishes more.
Or so, knit more, like, take up genealogy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, or like knitting anyway. So like, to me, it's always like, why not do more of the thing that I enjoy doing?
Yeah.
I love it. And I have said many times to people, the biggest asset that I had when starting out was youth and ignorance, because I just didn't know how fast you should write. So I just did it. And then it's, to me, like, my husband does CrossFit. So all of the things that I'm about to say are like hypothetical for me, because I don't work out and never want to work out, but I'm like,
don't have time.
It's like working out in that you build up a muscle to do it. And so then, at least that's what I feel like I've done a little bit. So for me, I'm always like, I'm just like having fun and doing what I enjoy to do, the way that weirdos say they enjoy running marathons.
Yeah, I totally understand. We're glad you do, because there's a lot of people reading your books and, you know, probably don't think you write fast enough. But I wanted also to say that, yeah, as well as writing for Harlequin Mills and Boon, like we've talked, your small town cowboy novels, the random biker novel we did together, which was a little bit out of our comfort zone. You've also recently published your first in, I guess, the women's fiction genre. I was just hoping that I had the right book there for a second, because I've been writing a sequel to one of my books that has a similar cover to yours, and I thought for a second that I'd pulled it to pick that up. But no, this is the right one, Secrets of a Happy Marriage, which I absolutely loved. So I just want to ask you, well, it's a curly question. Yeah, what do you think of the term women's fiction? That's part one. And part two is, how do you think, so this novel and the next one you've written in this genre differ from your romance novels? So two parts, go.
The term women's fiction is a marketing term, and on that score does not bother me, because we have to work to make things easy and direct for consumers, and there's no philosophical about that. If we're trying to figure out how to reach my readers, who I do assume are most likely to be women, doesn't mean men aren't allowed to read them, but I'm not concerned about that. I'm primarily assuming that that's the lens that I'm writing through, and so it doesn't really bother me. On the other hand, I mean, absolutely, when people ask me what is women's fiction, I'm like, well, it's fiction, but if you write it about women, or if a woman writes it. If men write it, it's literature. So, I mean, I think there's components to that. It's like, do I understand why we call it that, and why we use the term. Like, yes, absolutely. And it's for boring reasons, like getting it into the store in the right place and getting it in front of the right people. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of silly when you think about it, because like, where's the...
I was just going to butt in and say one thing I don't like. I feel exactly the same as you, but one thing I don't like is it doesn't really tell you anything about the book. Like if people ask me what do I write and I say I write romance, they're like, oh, sure. If I say I write women's fiction, they're like,
No, and usually people don't really know what you mean, is what I mean. People who are like neck deep in book stuff, they'll know. Like your genre readers, they know. But for better or for worse, everybody thinks they know what romance is. Now they may be wrong, but you're going to get a specific reaction to that. And I have found that when I say, and I also write women's fiction, people go, huh, well, what is that? And I'm like, well,
I get that look.
But when women do it. So,
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So how do they differ? How do you find like writing it, reading it? What's the difference? What can people expect?
So for me, like, I think women's fiction is, again, such a broad term. It can be anything. It doesn't have to have romance in it. It doesn't have to end happily. It doesn't have to, like, so there's so many different things that women's fiction can do. But for me personally, I don't know that it's hugely different from what I'm writing in romance, except that the focus is different. So normally the romance is the central arc of my books, and his journey is the same as her journey, and they're on this arc to end up together. And there's always family. There's always a component of family, particularly in my small town books. So you get a little bit of how those family relationships have informed who they are, but typically you don't see a ton of it. Like you'll get the brothers book later or something and get more information on the family, but still primarily what you're focusing on is the romance. This book, I've taken 4 women who are part of the same family, and we're kind of on these 4, they're having the same experience, but they're on 4 different journeys. And the issues of family are much more front and center. And while there is absolutely like there are romantic elements in it, and hopeful endings and all of that, because that's something that I know my existing readers are going to expect from my book. The focus is much more tight on the family element rather than having it be kind of adjacent to the romance. I would say for me, it's just a different focus.
As you're writing it, I guess keep that. I think this is my absolute favourite type of women's fiction because it does do all those things you see, but there are strong romantic elements. And so, it's such a great book. I can't wait till it's out in Australia and I can rave a bit more. So yesterday I also asked on Twitter and Instagram if anyone had any questions, and did get a couple. So this one's, I guess, from a writer. It says, how do you get to know your characters before starting to write? So I guess, what do you do beforehand?
I do not do a whole lot before writing something, because for me, I don't really know who they are until I get some words on the page. I can have an idea and I can have like some backstory and know kind of what the setup is, but until I actually start writing, I don't get a firm idea of their voice. And a lot of times, if I think I have it before I start, then I end up fighting with what comes out, because I had a preconceived about what I wanted. So what I've learned is to not get too attached, because sometimes they'll come out exactly like I thought they would, and sometimes I'm like, no, you're supposed to be serious. Why are you being like suddenly you're like a laconic playboy? I didn't want is that, and there's nothing I can do about it. So it's like, or he's really angry and I can't make him not be angry, and so then often what I'll do is write a little bit, write a couple chapters and then pause and kind of figure some things out. More backstory, the inciting incident to their deep wound or whatever. But to actually get their personalities, I have to write something.
That's right. So what do you have when you start then? Like, I mean, obviously you don't just sit down and go, okay, I'm just going to see what happens. Like you must have some idea, especially because you're so prolific.
Sometimes it's just, it depends on if the opening scene pops into my head or not. And I think romance and women's fiction, it's very different. I think because there's 4 female characters that you have to have a sense of, I actually still find that I have to start writing, but I have to go back over it more times, because to get
I know what you mean.
Unbelievably family, but also, distinctly different is a challenge. So it's like that requires a little bit more going over. But usually what I know is like, their backstory, their secret, because so much of women's fiction hinges on like having a secret.
Secrets.
So I have to know that before I start, but the personalities aren't there yet. With romance, usually what I know is, okay, so it's a romance. He's her older brother's best friend, and this is what's going to force them together. And this
you kind of know your conflict probably too.
Yeah, this is why it would be a bad idea for them to be together. And then that'll as I go. Because the reason will often be very surface, and I trick myself into thinking it's the only reason and that I haven't nailed down from the beginning, but I never do. So
yeah.
A lot of writing is lying to yourself.
Oh, totally agree. And I'm just going to add one in there if I remember what I was going to say then. Do you find do you think writing is getting easier for you, harder, or it changes from book to book, or that's just a totally stupid question?
I think that's a complicated question, because I would say the craft of writing is easier because I understand the pieces of a story, and I can go through, and like it used to be, if something was bad, I had to rewrite the whole book. And now I feel like if I really need to, I can pull at threads and know exactly what it's going to impact where. If I change here, I need to change this here, but all this can stay the same. I feel like I have a clearer picture of what I need to do to finish a book, of what a book needs to have in it. But there comes a point where you've done your well-worn things that you relate to naturally, and you start to want to do different things, and then you move away from what is, I think, instinctual to you, and you start to try to push yourself. And anytime you do that, it's challenging. So sometimes
you're out of your comfort zone.
Yeah, like I really like, what I've noticed is I really like books where the characters already know each other, particularly in a small town. So it's always harder for me to do a book where they don't have a pre-existing relationship, because for me it's harder to find the tension.
I think most people would probably find that. I mean, not in novellas and stuff too. It's much easier if you start with people you don't know. Yeah.
And then what I also find is that I like it when, if it's like an unrequited love, it's the heroine that has it. I don't like it when the hero's already in love. Well, like the last like heroine I've done, it's him that's been in love, and that's opposite to what I normally do. And so then it's like I'll start a book and think I know this dynamic because it's a best friend's younger sister book, but then it's like hung up on her, and I'm like, but that changes everything.
Yeah.
So it's like some of it is. So it's always give and take, and there's always those moments where your process starts to shift.
Okay, so the next question I've got is, what is your favorite type of book to write?
So I think primarily I like the books where the hero and heroine kind of have that moment where they see each other in a different light. So I love books where they already know each other and they have like a pre-existing relationship, and where them getting together would be like really bad. So I love the like best friends, little sister books, and I love Friends to Lovers. And Friends to Lovers is probably my favorite. It's like the one I choose to write as a treat to myself.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think everyone's got their things that they like best. My favorite is definitely high school lovers, kind of, or first lovers reunited and things like that. So yeah, no, that's good. So now a curly question for you. How do you feel about writing sex scenes, and has that got easier or harder? How do you write?
I love writing sex scenes. A lot of people don't, but I find them to be some of the most emotionally charged scenes in the book. And actually, because I dictate, people are always very curious, like how that is. But for me, it's not really any different than typing. I don't find it embarrassing. I obviously do it by myself, but I do all dictating by myself. Like a sex scene would be more or less embarrassing for me than if somebody just like hearing me speak my book, no matter what I'm saying. But like for me, the sex scene is like, it's such a layered scene. There's emotion, there's like physicality, like it should be really sexy, and it should be totally intrinsic to the characters. So for me, it can be like an all-consuming writing experience. And I find that like the more operatic I am when I'm dictating, the better it's going. Because I just feel like you can't, like, something might feel over the top to you, but it's actually not at all for a reader, because we're in our heads and we know what we're feeling, and we're like tracking with the characters on this really deep level. But I always think of it like theater, where they tell you that you have to speak loud enough to reach the person at the back of the room.
I love that idea.
shouting, you are projecting so that you're able to be heard by everybody. And that for me is how emotion works in books. And so for me, that sex scene is like, it's a distilled and heightened version of all the, like, you should have all the emotions in a sex scene. And so for me, it's just like, it sweeps me away. I love it. I love writing sex scenes.
I remember, I'm sure you've said though that you actually go quite, I've heard you talk about this before, go quite erotic in some of your sex scenes, and then you have to pull it back.
I do. So I tend to write them much more explicit than I actually let, like in edits, I tone them down. Not really so much what they're doing, but the words that I use. So I'll tend to dictate it a little bit more frank. And dress it up or like nicen it up a little bit when I edit it, because I find that sometimes that language can be a barrier for people to enjoy it, or it makes the eroticism a little less accessible for some people. But I have had I did have a first draft once actually get published on accident, and it
that is crazy.
I know, it's true. And I will tell you, it was Broke Down Cowboy. And I got a lot of angry emails about that book, but it won a Rita, so somebody liked it. So
maybe you should publish more first drafts.
Maybe.
Wow. And so did you say you got feedback from a reader who didn't like it?
Oh yeah, no, I got several. I'm always like, who are these authors that get all this nice reader mail? People just email me to chastise me. I get a lot of, you're a very good writer, you don't have to write such filthy scenes. But I'm like, I would like to, I don't know what to tell you.
I've got I often get, you know, I really like your books, but your characters do not need to swear as much. And I'm like, I don't even think they swear that much. Have you read other books? And, you know, not all of them swear. It's dependent on the character and the type of person they are, and as in real life. But it's amazing what people feel they have to tell you after reading a book. And I guess, and so that makes me think, this question wasn't on my list, but have you got any like standout bad reviews you want to share? Because I've done a library talk with a couple of other authors, and one thing we do is we share our bad reviews, because it's kind of like, it's depressing when you read it first yourself, but it's cathartic when you're sharing with other writers and you can laugh about it. So terrible ones to share.
You know, just ask my Goodreads average. A lot of people hate my books, and a lot of very repetitive, very
yeah, they keep reading them probably.
Yeah, a lot of thinky thoughts, very thinky, a lot of like feelings, angst. But my favorite bad review isn't mine, but I'm name checked in the bad reviews, so I feel like it's fair game to mention that Caitlin Cruz wrote a Harlequin Presents, which she dedicated to myself and Nicole Helm for encouraging her to go further with the kind of gothic English spirit that she was writing the book in. As we said, you cannot have enough billowing capes or horse rides or anything of the kind, so like just go for it. And the reviewer said, this book is dedicated to Maisey Yates and Nicole Helm for helping inspire the book. Caitlin Cruz needs better friends.
That's hilarious. I love it. You should get that framed on your wall. And I bet like
Caitlin Cruz needs better
deserves better friends. I bet, knowing Megan / Caitlin, myself a little bit, I bet she brings that up a lot and tells you that, you know, you're not the best friends.
Yeah.
Well, I've got a really funny, one of the reviews is not my own as well, that I really love talking about, and that's Sally Hepworth, friend of mine. One of the reviews we shared at our library talk was hers, and it's pretty good too. It was, everyone goes through life not knowing, a lot of people go through life not knowing what their purpose is. I felt that way until I read this book, and now I know my purpose is to make sure that nobody else I know has the misfortune of reading this book. It is a train wreck. I mean, some people are very creative with their reviews, and they give us just as much joy.
I mean, I'm like, maybe you should write a book then.
Exactly. You clearly know what you're talking about. So another question, sort of off on a tangent. Do you find, like, you've written a lot of books now, and congratulations, I see you've just written your 95th book for Harlequin and Boone, but you've written more books than that.
I have. The 95th just came out. My 100th is coming out in December, and so we have some fanfare planned around that. But yeah, 95 is The Bad Boy of Redemption Ranch, which is out in the States at the end of June and probably out in Australia a couple months later.
That's amazing. So exciting. So do you find that it's getting harder to write, easier to write, changes from book to book? What would you say?
I would say that the craft of writing gets easier. But some books are harder, and they're just going to be harder. And the longer that you write, the more that you want to push yourself, which I think is a good thing. But once you have gotten out of your comfort zone and you're kind of pushing away from the things that occur to you naturally, and that kind of the way that you naturally see characters handling things, or the way you naturally see a story go, I think those things can be really tricky. Or like sometimes you don't think through the full implications of taking a trope or a theme that you're really familiar with and just twisting something slightly. Like, for example, I actually write a lot of widowers. I don't know why. I like narration on grief. You read my women's fiction, so you know that. I wrote a widow in that book. But the first time that I wrote a heroine who had lost her husband, I realized I couldn't write her the same way. Like, I had this idea that I knew how to write losing a spouse. And I was like, you know what? And maybe this is a double standard, maybe not. I kind of just think it's what I want to fantasize about my own self and my own strength, is that while I find it so fun to write a hero who's basically flat on his back with grief and has been for years, that I am not interested in writing a woman in that same position. I like to write her kind of in her strength, you know, kind of a little bit less broken.
Yeah.
Which again, I think is like a comfort thing, where you're like, oh, I would like to imagine that I would like soldier on in the face of adversity, you know? So like, you know, I want to relate to the woman in the book in a different way than I do the guy. I'm not really looking to relate to him, you know? He's just an object of desire. So he's just there to be pretty and have and like, you know, he's kind of the mountain to climb. So I was like, oh, I thought I knew how to do this, and then it was just kind of tweaked slightly, and it was actually a very different writing experience. So sometimes things surprise me, and they you know, they feel really difficult when I thought they would be easy. So I think it's very book dependent, but in general, you learn the parts of a novel, you know how to take it apart, you know what you need to get through the whole thing. So I would say that, it gets easier, but that doesn't mean that every book is progressively easier.
Yeah. And in some ways, I don't know, I find like knowing what you should do actually can make it harder for me sometimes, because when I first started writing, I was like, I'm just going to write a story. This is lots of fun. You know, I didn't have the voices in my head of the reviewers that we talked about, or the editors. You know, I didn't have, it has to have a specific arc, and I have to tick off these turning points and blah, you know, there's got to be conflict. I just wrote, I think we've talked about this before, basically people going on dates, and, you know, and you know, while that probably wasn't as good, I felt a lot more free to write. So the more you know, it can be like a double-edged sword.
I think coming up with book ideas becomes such a big thing, because you're like, oh, that didn't sell as well, or
I've done that before too much.
You can't have your creativity in a vacuum anymore, because you kind of know too much.
And I feel like I don't know whether you feel this way, but I mean, you've written way more books than me, but like, you know, I find I have to manufacture ideas a little bit more than I did when I first started writing, because when I first started writing, inspiration came because it was all, you know, but now I've written those stories that, you know, kept burning.
I think that is less true of some things than others. I find that I'm not presents. I can always there's always a presents idea.
Wow.
I find that to be true with cowboys. I have written every easy novella that I had inside of me. There is no more. There are no more. I used to love doing them. I used to love writing short. Now I'm like, I've written every easy short book that exists naturally.
Because writing short is not easier.
It's not. And so you're like, well, that was a straightforward romance, and I've written lots of novellas, and like, so that is definitely, I feel like I've like hit my limit on novellas. I'm writing one right now. It's going so good.
Oh. Good luck with that. So we've also got a question here. What's your favorite time of the day to write, and where do you do your best writing?
So I would say that it would be nice if I could write in the morning. When I write in the morning, the whole day goes better. It's great to have the word count done right out of the gate. But I typically am answering emails and things in the morning, and not buckling down to write. So what I tend to do is write in the afternoon, even though it irritates me that I do that. But I dictate while I drive. And so if I'm having a really tough time starting, I'm having a really tough time focusing, I get in the car and I just drive. And
that amazes me.
Well, it's rural driving. I'm not like paying attention to traffic lights or anything. I'm on like roads I know really well. And there's something about that it's the removal of the ability to do something else.
Yeah, that's
there's
true.
something about engaging my brain in an activity like that. Because I get a lot of inspiration, while driving or walking anyway.
Yeah, me too.
Get a lot of ideas. So I find that rather than just driving and getting ideas, I just kind of blah 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 it out.
Talk the ideas.
Yeah, and so that's been really effective for me.
And I love that you can't check the email or go on Facebook or Twitter because you're just driving.
You're writing.
Yeah.
Like, you can't edit what you're writing. You can't see what you're writing. I have to edit it later. So it's like
that's really
of like trusting the stream of consciousness that's coming out of your mouth and like making it
hoping for the best.
So it's a release of a lot of control and a lot of second guessing, actually.
Well, it's working for you. So this is the Romantic Rendezvous lockdown edition. And so I think it's only fair that we ask you a bit of an isolation question. Right. What's the thing you've missed most during sort of these time? I mean, I guess the restrictions may be similar, different, like there's slightly differences over there, but you've had things closed, you've been stuck inside, kids back being not at school and things like that. How's it been?
I would say that we are about the luckiest that you could be. My parents live over the fence. They went into isolation around the same time that we did. We had been with them the whole time. So it was like we felt safe to include them in our situation.
That's nice, yeah.
And so we didn't have to miss family. What I have missed is my friend Megan Crane and Rusty and our book. We have a book club. I really miss the romance book club. I really miss our romance bookstore. And I really miss knitting on the weekends with Megan and Rusty. And so really it's just been seeing friends. And otherwise, I would say we have been super lucky. We've been just hanging out at home. We live in the country. We've had access to the outdoors. We have a nice yard. Like we've felt very, very, very lucky through all of this. But yeah, I am definitely starting to miss some of that face-to-face friend interaction. We've done some Zoom knitting, but it's not the same.
I was going to ask if you've done the Zoom book club and knitting, but it isn't the same, is it?
We have, and I had to get, I'm not wearing them because this is a fancy video where like people are going to watch it, but all private FaceTime and videos, I'm wearing blue blocker glasses because the Zoom has been torture on my eyes. So I am done with video stuff.
I know, there's been a lot more video stuff, isn't it? I remember when it first sort of started, I had a book just coming out and thinking, oh, all my events have been cancelled, it's great, I have all this time in the world, but instead we've just done it online.
Videos.
And we already spend so much time online and on the computer.
I went to a Zoom rave.
What?
Yeah,
I didn't know you go to raves anyway.
I don't. My very good friend who is in my book club and manages Rebel Heart Books, which is the store where Megan Crane and I run our romance book club, and she's also going to be a debut presents author in December.
What's her name?
Marcella Bell. And so her debut book is coming out in December, and she's fabulous and wonderful, and it was her birthday, and she had a Zoom rave. And I will tell you, she is probably the only person in the entire world I would have done that for, because she is light in human form, and I love her to pieces. And I danced in my office with a fake background with all these strangers on Zoom cameras for 2 hours, and there's pretty much no one else I would ever do that for. I
can't even imagine a Zoom rave. Okay.
So what's great is
blown my mind.
When the host's music like blips and just you and all these strangers and like your audio works, so you like suddenly can hear all that, and you're just like, there's no music and we're all dancing and we don't know each other. Hey, what's up?
Okay, this wasn't a question on my list, but I have to ask, is that going in a book?
I hate putting technology in books. I really do, because it changes so quickly, but I think as a memory that would work really well. But true. Like for the most part, I do not put social media or technology of any kind into my books. I know a lot of people, that's like a staple of some stories, but like for me, it's like it changes so quickly, and I feel like I just sound lame when I try to do it. Like I'm like, the kids are on the TikToks these days.
I totally understand. And this is another random question, because I know a couple of author friends and I talked about how are we going to deal with the whole COVID-19 thing moving forward in our books? Is it something we, address because it's you know, changed how people do things, or do we just forget about it? So what's your thought on that?
I mean, my take on it is I don't mention wars or politics or all kinds of things. I think one of the biggest fallacies is that contemporary writers are not world building. We are absolutely world building, and we are presenting in many cases an idealized version of the world. I'm not necessarily writing a small town that has to be concerned about the politics of keeping, or not politics, the economics of keeping Main Street.
Sorry, it's my timer telling us to shut up and I can't turn off.
So I think, you know, there will always be ships. Like there are always going to be books that came out on the bubble between when airport security ramped up after 9/11 and when it didn't. But because of the kind of book that I write, that's not something that I've ever had to discuss.
It's true,
I tend to hand wave those details anyway. And I saw a meme that was basically saying like, oh, you know, romance novels written during COVID-19, I took my mask off and then my gloves off. And I was like, I don't even write them taking off their socks because it sounds like so like, I tend to just ignore the things that I don't want to focus on. And so for me,
I love that policy.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't want to read about him taking off his socks. It's not sexy. You don't want the man standing there in only his socks.
No, totally agree. And, you know,
so,
I think.
So I'm like, I think there are like whatever becomes a lasting change. Like, of course, like, again, there's these movies from the 90s where they're running through to say goodbye to somebody at the gate. And you can't do that anymore. That's not going to happen. That doesn't mean there's no space for that to exist. But it's like, I think you naturally include,
you adapt
and you adapt, but I don't think it needs to be a sharp decision. But like, do I necessarily want to talk about, oh, and then we were in isolation for 3 months? Not really. Like I don't, because I'm bored of it. That's, you know, everybody's free to handle that in the way that they do, but I don't think anyone has to do anything. I think you kind of know what your take on handling current events is. And like I said, I don't even like to include technology because I don't like to put it in too firm of a place or in time, because it's like indefinitely contemporary.
No, I totally get you, and I agree with you. I don't think I'll be focusing too much on it. I've got one last question because the timer's gone off, but I have to ask this one because it's a tricky one and I like putting you on the spot. If you could read only one other romance author for the rest of your life, who would it be? Only one.
I am going to say Megan Crane / Caitlin Cruz, because she's one author with 2 names.
You are a cheater.
And I've gamed the system.
Okay, and then I have one final question that's linked to that, and that is, do you have a favourite novel of Megan Crane or Caitlin Cruz?
I have it sitting right here. Wow. True Cowboy Christmas.
You love it that much.
Which is basically like Sarah Plain-Tall-esque with sex. She's like the girl next door who has a convenient marriage with the taciturn cowboy that she has always had a crush on, and I love this book. And but if I had to choose 2 more, you didn't ask, but I'm going to give them to you anyway. It would be her Castelli's duet that comes out. That's Harlequin Presents, and the first one is Unwrapping the Castelli Secret by Caitlin Cruz, and it is basically a story of a woman who's in like a very tumultuous relationship with her stepbrother, a secret one. They could never tell anyone. And she cannot get away from this, like they cannot get away from each other. And so she gets in a car accident and like escapes the wreckage of the car, realizes it looks so bad that everyone will think she dies, and literally like walks to another life to like get away from him. And then
love it.
Her on the street like 5 years later, and at this point she's had his baby and all this stuff. And she pretends she's had amnesia the whole time, and that's why she didn't come back.
I have to read that book.
I love it.
It's just too out there. I have to read it. So I think one more question. I know we're probably going over time. Do you reread books?
Oh, absolutely. I reread books all the time. And I have a lot of historicals I love to reread. I read What I Did for a Duke by Julianne Long multiple times. Jackie Ashenden's books, Taking Him and Having Her, I have reread so many times. I just reread them during the lockdown. They are like comfort reads for me.
I remember when she was writing those.
They're so good. And so, yeah, I totally reread.
Cool. I wish I did. I see it must be a fast reader too. I need to write faster and read faster.
I'm a really fast reader when I like the book, and when I don't like the book, it takes me like 3 weeks and I'm angry. And I'm
doing that at the moment. We won't say what book I'm reading. I should just give up. Okay, now because this is the lockdown thing, we've got a treasure hunt for people who are watching, and so we're both going to hold up our treasure hunt code. So do you want to do yours first? And I'll just read it out so everyone can see. So Maisey's lockdown treasure hunt code is 72453685. So mark that down. And here is mine. Do you mind reading that for me? If you can finish?
Higher. Lift it. Higher. Yay. Okay. Rachel's code is 628-56538.
Yay, we can read numbers. Woo! Okay. Thank you so much for chatting with me. I could have talked all day and all night for you. Hope everyone enjoyed it, and keep doing what you're doing because we all love your books. And for those people in Australia, this is coming out soon and you have to read it.
Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.